All right, so to start our notes today, we're just going to look at first a little bit what the Galapagos are like as we talk more about Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. It's nice to kind of picture in our minds what the Galapagos Islands look like and some of the animals that live there. So again, a couple summers ago, my husband and I took a Galapagos Island cruise on a ship called the Majestic. This is just a map of where we went. There's 2 airports that you can fly into. There's only 3 islands that have people that live on them in small villages and communities. The rest of them there are no people. It's part of a national park through Ecuador. So most people don't live on these islands. And really the only way to visit most of them is through some sort of tour, and mostly cruise tours. So here's the boat that we were on, the Majestic. Many boats are like this, or a little bit different in shapes, but typically they hold anywhere from 10 to 50 passengers. This one was a 16 passenger. Usually they anchor offshore and then you take a little boat to get into the actual islands. For each of the day trips, each boat has a naturalist aboard that is certified through Ecuador that knows where to go and to teach you about the plants and animals of the Galapagos. So one of the places we did see some of the Galapagos tortoises. Notice the shell here. This one's pushed a little bit further back. You can stick his neck up a little bit. This was actually at a reserve where the tortoises are free to come and go as they please. They're not fenced in, but it is a safe place for them to be. Their food is there. The particular people that operate this don't feed them. They just naturally let them come and go as they please. Lots of sea lions along the Galapagos. Most islands had some sea lions. The baby sea lions were very playful. They actually would come into the water when we were snorkeling and would kind of swim around us. The adults were usually sleeping on the shore, but they usually didn't come into the water. So here's just a video clip. I was videoing this with the underwater camera. This is my husband. They kind of act like puppies almost. Again, these are the baby ones. They swim around you as you twist and turn. They kind of twist and turn with you, blow bubbles. And when they lose interest, they just swim away. So tourists are able to just be in the water. You're not supposed to touch them. This one coming right at me. So it was pretty fun. We circled several times, and several times they got on the water with us. Another thing the Galapagos are noted for are the different birds. So the blue-footed booby is one of the type of birds. Their blue feet are based on what they eat, and their blue beaks, they eat fish that are blue. The males have bright blue feet. They actually kind of kick their legs up so the females circling around can see them. The brighter the blue, that means the better fishermen they are, and so the better mate they are. There's red-footed boobies. They have red feet. They eat some seafood that's more in a red color. Marine iguanas are very common on lots of the islands. They're usually black, or sometimes they've got some red coloring. These are the only iguanas that actually go in the ocean to feed. They can actually dive down and they eat seaweed. They are cold-blooded, so they get very cold. The waters around the Galapagos are very cold waters, even though it's near the equator. So once they feed for 20 minutes to 30 minutes, they get very cold. So they come back on shore and they just sunbathe the rest of the day on the rocks. Oftentimes they're grouped together, piled on top of each other. So this is the only place in the world where iguanas actually go into the ocean to feed. So here's just a clip. I was watching this little one. It took him a while to decide to get into the water, but eventually he does get in and starts to kind of swim away. Just to kind of show you that they do get in the water and swim. He would then dive down once he gets further out to feed on the seaweed. And the waves are pretty strong, so it took him a bit to kind of get out there. So we saw the dome Galapagos tortoises in the wild at that reserve. The saddleback ones we didn't see in the wild. This was actually at a breeding facility. So these were maintained in a facility, but you can see how the saddleback is really pushed far back, a lot more neck here, very different shell structure. Here's just one at the reserve feeding. Just they're very slow, just eating the grass here. They would eat some fruits as well that would fall to the ground. Some of these guys just would barely move much in a whole day, just feed in that one spot. So here he's trying to get up, lifting himself up, taking about not even a step, and then kind of falling back down again. Here's one that actually did a little bit of walking, a couple of steps, again, very slow. And that's about as far as he went. Another thing that you can see in the Galapagos are penguins. They actually are called Galapagos penguins. They're the only penguins that live so close to the equator. Again, the water is cold enough that they're able to survive. We didn't see large groups of penguins here like you would see in other locations. This one was just all by itself. We saw 3 one other time in the water. They're one of the smallest penguins. They're very, very small, but they can survive in the waters around the Galapagos. Darwin finches we saw all over in all the different islands. You can see their beak shapes here a little bit different. So these are just 2 of the about 12 or 13 types of finches. Just some of the different shorelines. The Galapagos are all volcanic islands. So you can see the hardened lava here in black. There's also the sand as well. So you see the contrast between those. There's just another little spot. We've got a sea lion sunning itself here. There's some crabs down here. And the main thing here are these cactus trees. These cactus trees have evolved as well. The land iguanas will eat the fruit of the prickly pear cactus. And over time, the tree has grown taller to prevent some of those land iguanas from eating it. And it's got a real tough bark on it too, so it's harder. So the cactus was evolving as well, not as long as with the iguanas. It's just another shoreline. And there were quite a few really white sandy beaches. Again, it's all national park. Usually they allowed one tour group of about 15 people at a time. So our tour group had this whole beach to ourselves. Notice the dried up rock here, lava kind of sticking out as well. A few more sea lions. We saw some green sea turtles as well. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of some of those animals that are around the Galapagos. All right, so to continue our notes with letter D, hopefully you watched the video on evidence for evolution and answered those questions. So this goes a little bit more into that fossil evidence. So fossils are petrified remains or traces of animals and plants. The fossil record is accumulation of evidence from these remains and traces such as skeletons, footprints. It could be shells, anything that's left over to show that something had been there at one time. Paleontologists have been collecting and classifying fossils in an organized fashion for almost 200 years. So we do have a lot of fossil evidence. So discoveries that provided evidence for evolution. So the idea is that life that existed more than 500 million years ago was vastly different in appearance of forms from life today. Although Earth has had oceans for most of its existence, fish fossils have only been found in rocks 500 million years old or even younger. Most top predators today are mammals, but none of them existed at the time of dinosaurs or before that. So again, we're seeing this change of organisms over time. Majority of living organisms today have no similar form in the fossil record, except for a couple of them. Sharks, cockroaches, and ferns have been in the fossil records for a long time. Cockroaches and sharks have not changed much in millions of years. So the conclusion from studying fossils, life on Earth is constantly changing, and changes have occurred over huge timescales, hundreds of thousands or millions of years. So we do see that life has changed and is still changing. So scientists can actually age fossils. So age of a rock can be determined by carefully examining the differences in the ratios of isotopes. So isotopes, if you remember from chemistry, are versions of atoms that are heavier or lighter than other versions of the same atom. So example, there's carbon-14 has more mass than carbon-12. If a fossil of a bone has a higher level of carbon-14, it is younger than a bone that has a very low level of carbon-14. So they can do dating of the rock, and then they can figure out the fossil based on the age of the rock that the fossil was found in. Okay, so this is carbon-14 is radioactive and changes its identity to another atom, to nitrogen-14. So this process is called decay. It's a process of radioactive parent isotope changing into a stable daughter isotope. So over time, it slowly changes into a different element, essentially. Half-life is the time it takes for half of the parent isotope to decay into a stable daughter isotope. So the ratio of radioactive carbon to stable nitrogen is used to determine the age of fossils. So here is a little graph. So time in thousands of years remaining carbon-14. So it starts off at the beginning at 100% carbon-14, and over time, we're going to have less and less of it as it decays, and we end up with our percentages here remaining. So the amount of decay of a short time after death, so we have a lot of the unstable radioactive parent isotope, a small amount of the stable daughter isotope. Amount of decay longer after death, again, we're losing some of that radioactive and getting more of the stable daughter isotope. Right, another thing that we can look at with evolution is artificial selection. So the fossil record is incomplete. Okay, there's a lot of things that didn't leave fossils if they had soft bodies, depending on the rock at that time. So we don't know everything from fossils. But breeding domesticated animals provides a good record of change in heritable characteristics. And Darwin did this as well. He actually looked at animal breeding, looked at dogs, and saw some of the same ideas. Breeders have learned to choose the males and females with the most desirable genetic characteristics and breed them together, hoping that their offspring will have those characteristics that they desire. So this is called artificial selection. Humans select which animals will reproduce in order to get desired traits. So we've done this for farm animals, race horses, all the different dog breeds, and even for plants like crops, getting the most out of corn and oats and wheat. Another thing that we can look at for evidence is homologous structures. Anatomical structures similar in form, but are found in seemingly dissimilar species and show that they have a common ancestor. So the best example is pentadactyl limbs, penta for 5, dactyl for fingers. It's found in many diverse animals. So it's basically their bone structure of their arms. So the shape and number of bones may vary, but the general format or the form that they take is the same. So the limb may have different functions in each animal, okay, but again, we have the same basic setup of the bones. It's suggested that all 5-fingered organisms have a common ancestor. So this video clip does a nice job of showing that. Look at the way the bones are put together.
The forelimbs of all vertebrates are made from the same basic groups of bones. We say that such structures are homologous. The human arm has 6 groups of bones. The humerus is the bone in the top part of your arm extending from your shoulder to your elbow. The radius and ulna allow you to rotate your hand to turn your palm facing up and down. The bones in your fingers are called phalanges. When we compare the human arm to the forearm of a penguin, an alligator, and a bat, we found some striking similarities. In our cases, the humerus extends from the mouth of the animal to a point where the forelimb can go. Next in line come the radius and ulna, in each case side by side. The end of the forearm shows large amount of rotation. In a bat, the phalanges become obtuse. And in a penguin, some of the bones are confused. Even in these cases, however, similarities in bone structure lead us to define these features as anomalies.
So the idea is that they have the same basic format, that they had an ancestor that had that format. And so we see all these similar bone structures in so many different organisms. And this is just 4. There's many other ones that show the same pattern. So that's probably the best example of the homologous features. All right, so that's where we're going to stop. We're not going to go on to G today. Right, so hopefully you got those notes taken. I will have a worksheet for you in a homework box. Again, do whatever format works the best for you. I know it's not the easiest. If you want to print it and take a picture, that's fine. If you just want to type in the answers, just number them in the discussion box, that's fine too. Whatever is the easiest for you. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll have a little bit more notes tomorrow.